Welcome everyone, my name is Ana Aglufi and today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects because we all have this and it is emotions. We're going to be talking about emotional freedom as it regards to Ayurveda. We're going to be talking about happiness, the needs of human beings, emotions and how they relate with our dosha types. We're also going to be talking about the 7 biological responses, and these words might not mean much to you right now, but by the end of the session, you'll have a clear understanding of what it is, and you might even be curious to learn more. So the 7 biological responses are fight, flight, freeze response, the reactive response, the restful awareness response, the intuitive and creative response, and the visionary and sacred response. We'll also be talking about conscious communication, emotional pain, and the 7 steps of emotional clearing. So before we go any further and keep engaging our intellect, I'm going to invite you to ground into your body, which is something I always like to do before studying or really delving into such heavy topics, right? So I'm going to ask you to sit back on your chair, and if you're lying down, grab a blanket and make yourself cozy. Feel how your body is supported. Feel how your hips are supported by the chair. Feel how your feet are supported by Mother Earth, by the ground. Now I invite you to take a deep breath in and out and let go a little bit of today's stress. There's nowhere else you need to be but here right now. So gift yourself this time. Let's breathe in together one more time and breathe out with a little sigh. And one more time, breathing in, breathe into your belly. Hold it and breathe out with a sigh. You can shake your hands. You can stretch your neck. And let's dig right in. So one of the reasons I really resonate with Ayurveda is because it recognizes that emotional balance is one of the fundamental pillars of health. So in Ayurveda, health is not only the absence of disease, but it's also the state of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. And Ayurveda teaches that the physical ailments have an emotional root cause. And I know this personally. I actually have 2 herniated discs in my back. And the way I've been able to really sink into healing has been through doing some deep emotional work. So our body-mind is affected by our emotions. So then, therefore, cultivating emotional freedom begins with awareness. It begins with awareness of our feelings, of what we need to release, and what brings us joy and happiness. So then, what is happiness? It's such a popular topic. We all want it. Where can we get it? How can we buy it, right? It's a shared desire of most people. We all want to be happy. So we have been actually conditioned to believe that we can derive happiness from external sources, like for example, money or a career. This kind of external source of happiness is called object referral. And the opposite, when our happiness comes from within, it's called self-referral. That's when we identify with our inner self and our internal state to derive happiness, right? So true joy is an internal state of awareness that allows us to be happy for no reason. It can be happiness without depending on circumstances, events, or people. And how can we get it? Well, let's talk about it. So when we perceive that our physical and psychological needs are met, we feel comfortable. We feel pleasure, we feel happiness, contentment, satisfaction, and cheerfulness. So what are the fundamental human needs? We've all heard about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but today we're gonna follow 4 fundamental human needs, easy steps to remember. They all start with A's, right? So it's attention, affection, acceptance, and appreciation. And when we have those 4 fundamental human needs met, then we can experience contentment. And again, they are attention, affection, acceptance, and appreciation. So, what are emotions? Emotions are derived from our perception of our needs being either met or not met. And I like to think of emotions as energy in motion, right? They are sensations in our body that are associated with thoughts in our mind. And we experience emotions in two ways. It's either comfort or discomfort. So comfort encompasses all the feelings that move us from constriction to expansion, right? From to yes. They include joy, peace, love, pleasure, delight, gratitude. These are comfort, right? Comfort emotions. And the other set of emotions are discomfort. So this includes all the feelings that constrict us. These are distress, frustration, anger, regret, fear, pain, right? There's secondary emotions too. And these are based on unmet needs that are not resolved. And they often lead to anxiety, hostility, guilt, and depression. And what's important to remember is that the feelings that are not fully expressed can accumulate as emotional toxins, or as we call it in Ayurveda, emotional ama. And I've also experienced that. I held on to many feelings of discomfort for years without even realizing it because it was a survival mechanism. I didn't want to feel them. It was scary to feel them, right? And what happened was that my body accumulated that as toxins, as ama, and then it came out as physical pain. So, in regards to emotions, we can either react to unmet needs, which is instinctual, right? It's conditioned, it's learned behavior, is what usually a lot of people are doing nowadays. Or we can go a little bit further and we can respond. And that implies being aware of our emotions and knowing that we have a choice. And so all the doshas, of course, can experience every kind of emotion, but each dosha has a tendency to react to unmet needs in different ways. So for example, for Vata and Vatapita, for example. So Vata have a tendency to react with feelings of anxiety or fear or worry or guilt. They're likely to ask, what did I do wrong? And I can totally relate to that. I used to feel guilty about a lot of things, right? I felt like a lot of responsibility. What did I do wrong? That's the Vata. Then Pitta, they have a tendency to feel angry or hostile. They are prone to blame others. And they could ask themselves, what did you do wrong, right? Pitta is intense, it's fire. And then Kapha, on the other hand, they have a tendency to become sad or discouraged. They may ignore situations or withdraw. And they can say, I don't want to deal with it. So now we're going to talk about the 7 biological responses. And these are fight, flight, freeze, reactive, restful awareness, intuitive, creative, visionary, and sacred. And they actually go in order from the most primitive to the most evolved. So the first one is called fight, flight, freeze response. And this is the most popular one that people experience and also has beginning to talk about, right? This is the most primitive survival response. It serves us to keep the body protected, right? It's like, imagine thinking that you're about to get run by a train or you're gonna get eaten by a lion, right? It's based on the fear and the perception that our environment is threatening. And actually our body is still having the primitive response as if an animal is going to eat us, but in reality, it can be triggered by an email or a text. The second response is the reactive or the ego response. And this is really the psychological equivalent of the fight, flight, freeze response. It is our attempt to control the environment through reactivity. Okay, in this type of response, emotions are in the domain of the ego. So when we perceive that our boundaries are crossed or that our ego is being attacked, our needs are not being met, then uncomfortable feelings are generated and we react to them, right? So most of us are used to responding in these two first categories, fight, flight, freeze, and reactive or ego response. The next response is called restful awareness response. In restful awareness response, our body relaxes and we actually bypass the reactive response. Our internal references shifts from our ego to our spirit, right? So we are not so conditioned to become defensive or triggered because our ego is getting is getting doubted or questioned, right? We are actually a little bit more in touch with spirit, our spiritual nature. We can witness the activity of the mind, and we can become capable of conscious choice making, because before we are not capable of making a conscious decision. We're just reacting, right? So the restful awareness response is really cultivated through meditation, of course. It's one of our favorite practices. So when we have restful awareness response, our heart rate can actually decrease, as well as the blood pressure. The respiration can be slower. We can sweat less, a little bit less of stress hormones, and our anti-aging hormones can actually increase. Intuitive response is being aware of our interpretations. We are then choosing conscious observation and authentic expression. We have a present moment awareness in our daily life. And in this intuitive response, it is easy to have conscious communication. That means that, for example, we're not victimizing ourselves or we're not blaming others, right? We can be accountable for our own choices, and we are aware that we are interpreting a certain word or a certain action or a certain event, right? And again, meditation is a key practice to foster an intuitive response. The next one is called a creative response. And this is one of my favorite words because I love creativity. And you can think about creative response like thinking outside of a box, right? It's applying a new context or a new meaning to a situation or a circumstance. So for example, if something is happening and the way that you have solved it in the past has been the same, if you have been in a practice of meditation and you have restful awareness and you're conscious of your choice making, then you can be like, maybe this time I can step outside of the box, think outside of it, and apply a new kind of solution, right? And solutions here in this creative response emerge by quieting down the inner dialogue. And we all know that, again, meditation, which is the journey between noisy traffic in our mind to silence and quiet calm, right? The sixth biological response is called visionary response. And this means living from the collective soul. In this response, you know that you are part of a collective and you can envision what is possible. You have the ability to access collective dreams, and you have also the ability to access archetypal realms. So you can consciously participate in the story of your life. Doesn't that sound interesting? So questions to awaken the visionary response in you are: what stories would you like to enact? Who inspires you? And what attributes do you connect with? So for example, Deepak Chopra is for me an example of a visionary response, right? He wants to teach this beautiful 5,000-year-old wisdom of Ayurveda from the East and bring it to Western normal society. He is in this, he has his vision and he's constantly working towards that. He knows that he's in a collective consciousness, and then he's actually evolving the collective consciousness through his actions and through his life story. And finally, the sacred response. In the sacred response, the sense of self expands beyond the constricted ego. You are one with consciousness. That's when you really access unity consciousness, right? And compassion becomes a natural expression. Doesn't that feel amazing? Imagine like compassion is your natural expression to anything that is occurring to you. It's just love in action, right? You transcend the question, what's in it for me? And instead you dwell in, how can I be of service? When you're in a sacred response, you live in the question, how can I be of service? Now that we've gone through the 7 biological responses, we're going to talk about conscious communication. So the process of conscious communication you can use to gain clarity about how you feel. You can use it to identify what you need, and you can take responsibility to consciously communicate your needs to another person. And this specific method is based on the work of Marshall Rosenberg from the Nonviolent Communication book. So the first step would be to ask yourself, and you can do this in a journal, or perhaps if you like in a video to yourself or in a voice note to yourself. The idea is to process what is going on inside of you, right? So the first question would be, what happened? And here you state the facts, plainly and simply. Don't use too many complicated words, just what are the actual facts of what happened? What was a neutral event? The next question would be, what am I feeling? And then you can describe how you feel, choosing words that describe only the emotion and avoid victimization words. And in a little bit after this, I'm going to teach you some of these words that you can use for conscious communication. Then the next question would be, what do I need that I'm not receiving? Again, if it's about unmet needs, what is that need that I'm not receiving? And you can use one of the four fundamental needs, or you can, be in touch and figure out some other needs. And here you can identify the need you have that isn't being met. What do I need that I'm not receiving? The next question is, what am I asking for? What am I asking for? You can make your request with a level of respect rather than demand, right? This is conscious communication. It's about taking accountability for our own actions and for our own needs being met or unmet. So you can make a request. What am I asking for? And the last question is, what is the gift or opportunity in this situation? And here you have a moment to observe how you benefited from this conscious communication process. So as I mentioned, here are some list of words that you feel when our needs are being met. And this might sound a little bit redundant or silly, but we have not been taught about this in school. So we actually don't have words that describe our emotions many times. So here are needs, are words that explain when our needs are being met. So for example, I'm bright, I'm carefree, delightful, I feel enthusiastic, optimistic, peaceful, thankful, loving, joyful. On the other hand, these are some words that describe when our needs are not being met. So for example, I'm afraid, I feel anxious, I'm bitter, I'm confused, I'm embarrassed, I'm frightened, right? So again, we want to avoid using words that encourage victimization. We're not trying to blame the other person for everything, for anything. It was just a neutral event, right? So we're just trying to share how we feel. So when our needs are not being met, we can feel irritable, but we're not choosing to accuse them. We can feel invisible, we can feel afraid or jealous. It's about I. Remember to use I statements. And now we're gonna talk about 7 steps to emotional clearing. And 7 steps to emotional clearing you can use when you have a feeling inside of you, you have emotion, energy, emotions that are like building in your body, and you want to release them so that you don't accumulate toxins or ama, right? So the 7 steps to emotional clearing, again, you can do this in journaling or taking a walk, any kind of way that you feel most comfortable in seeing it and getting out of your mind. So the 7 steps would be, take responsibility for what you're feeling, identify the emotion, witness the feeling in your body. Now, this is an important step. Before, I used to intellectualize all my feelings, and it wasn't until I got into this, I had this back injury that I was really invited to feel into my body. So if you have a practice of meditation, if you have a practice of mindfulness, you really want to quiet down and be with your body and feel into, you can witness the feeling in your body, right? Then you can express the emotion in private to yourself. Then this next step is important also. You release the emotion through a ritual. So you can either, if you're sad, you can cry, and it is totally safe and it's beautiful and it's actually natural and healthy to cry, people. I am a big fan of crying. There is no need to hold the emotions in. Of course, you're not gonna be crying every day, but if there's emotions coming up, we need to release them, right? So if there's sadness, you can cry. If there's anger, you can discharge, you can punch a pillow, you can go for a run, you can go for a walk, right? But you need to release the emotion through a ritual. Then you can share the emotion with a good listener, because remember that healing happens in relationships. So if you have that that person that can listen to you, and you can actually ask them to just listen and not give any solution. That would be beautiful. You can share the emotion with this. And then the most important step is to celebrate. Celebrate that you have gone through, that you have intentionally prioritized your emotional health, and you celebrate yourself for doing this. So thank you so much for coming today and seeing this session about emotional freedom. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it triggered your curiosity to learn more. And of course, please make sure to practice this. Practice in your life. And if you have any questions, reach out to me.